Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription. Let's get started.
Anyway, I could go on and on about this, but there's a lot of problems with this underpricing that I think is pretty prevalent in the profession.
Yeah. And I really want to talk. I actually wanted to talk to you about it because I want to break down the phrase sketchy business practices,
Yeah.
Because what inspired you for that framing?
One, it's kind of attention grabbing, right? And the other thing is, like, I'm sketching out ideas on a whiteboard as part of the business practices, as part of the business of problem solving, like in everyday issues that maybe cross my desk. So yeah, I mean, it all came from being able to sketch out your ideas, and it has that double meaning that maybe is a little eye catching. Probably too clever for its own good, if I'm completely honest, Saul. But I don't take myself I take my work serious, but I don't take myself that serious too. You can have a little fun with this kind of thing, right? So if I'm solving a business problem and I'm sketching out the solution, that's where sketchy business practices came from.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where we're trying to figure out also came from.
Yeah.
That word that came from the same thought process. You're right. It's no harm having a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when a firm is going into this mindset, when the firm adopts this creative thinking process, and this is something that has to be it has to become like a culture, right? It cannot just be like some team that does it, or oh, Mike's team is the one who does it this way, but it's not something like everybody does it. It's like it has to become a part of a culture. Welcome everyone to another episode of your favorite podcast we're trying to figure out. I'm your host Saul, and I've got a seriously creative mind with me, Mike Manalac. Now, if you've seen the course Sketchy Business Practices floating around LinkedIn, yes, that's Mike. But here's the twist. It's not what you think. We're not here to talk about cooking the books. We're talking creative problem solving in accounting. So let's go. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
All right, Saul, it's great to be here. Thanks for the intro, and excited to see what we get into today.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, you had quite a ride in the accounting world. Could you walk us through how you got started and what pulled you away from the traditional track?
Yeah. So I kind of started off on the traditional path. I started out in kind of interning, going way back, interning at a small accounting shop. Then went into a top 20 firm, Cohn Resnick, and then from there into Big Four with PwC. So progressively kind of getting better, or bigger, I should say. And that was on the audit side of the house. So I was mainly working on financial services and real estate clients, things like that. Switched over to industry, was always kind of shooting for, joining the Fortune 500 at, a company that I thought was cool and doing cool things. So I joined Walmart's e-commerce division. That was right when they were ramping up, really trying to take market share or compete with Amazon at the time, and very fun time to be with Walmart. Learned a lot there, and then joined Google after that. And I was based out of the Sunnyvale office. Still on the same team. I'm on the business finance accounting team. We support Google ads, so Google search and YouTube. Doing a lot of cool things there, and later transferred over to the Chicago office here, which is where I sort of helped to build out the finance team and this location as a hub. So pretty fun career, and kind of a lot of moves that started in Baltimore, then out in San Francisco, and now to Chicago. So I would probably say, to answer your second question, some of that is traditional, going
Yeah.
through public accounting fresh out of school. I feel like that's the common path. Even jumping over to industry afterwards is relatively common. I think
Yeah.
maybe where I've taken a different path is maybe moving around the country for these opportunities, and kind of swinging big really with my aspirations as far as joining some of the biggest companies that I thought were,
Yeah.
operating at a hard to match scale, and doing those kind of things. Maybe that's where it got a little non-traditional,
Mhm.
um, but otherwise it's a tweak on the traditional path, I'd say.
Well, was there a moment or like a project where you thought that this is just not working? There's got to be a better way. Something like that happened.
So probably a lot of your audience. I've listened to a bunch of the podcasts that you have, so I'm
Right.
sure a lot of your audience will relate to this. But I did 8 busy seasons in public accounting. It can get to you,
Whoa.
and at the time that we're filming this, it's like right at the tail end of the busy season. So I'm
Yeah.
sure people by the time they hear it are going to get PTSD even just thinking about it. But close to a decade of doing that, I started to just reflect, am I going to do that the rest of my career? I was a manager at the time, and I feel like senior manager was on the horizon. And shortly after that, you start talking director, maybe partner. And I had to ask myself, is that what I wanted? I hate that, I actually I enjoyed the work. I didn't enjoy the long hours of busy season.
Yeah.
Few people will probably tell you that they do. So that moment was really, I think I was getting to a point where had to make the decision, am I going to be a lifer in the public accounting world? And when I came to the conclusion that the answer was no, I really challenged myself to then think, well, then what? Because really college and a lot of your mentors in the public accounting space, a lot is pushing towards public accounting, and getting to that partner track and staying to partner. And while that's great for a lot of people, once you deviate from that path, it's kind of like, well, good luck to you. Go find your way. And so I had to challenge myself to think about, well, if not this, then what? So
Yeah.
that was sort of my aha moment there.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's always a leap of faith moment, like you rightly said. Once you're out of it, then you're like, okay, it's you're on your own. Good luck. You know, I wish you the best. But and it's not easy. It's a mental challenge. It's also an economical challenge. It's also a challenge from a life standpoint because you as an individual, we have aspirations with building a family, growing, so many things, and that's difficult. But you took
Yeah.
that leap of faith, and that has led you to where we are today, right?
Yep.
So let's go to the title that's getting everyone curious: sketchy business practices, because that was something that even I got interested into when I looked at it first. I'm like, whoa, that's interesting, I want to look into it. But super clever, super clever. But it was only after I talked to you that I came to know that, wait, but it's really about whiteboarding and sketching through business problems, right? So tell us
Yep.
about the course. I mean, how is it? Tell us about the course and how is it flipping the narrative?
Yeah, no, I mean, you summarized it pretty well. It's not about cooking the books, right? It's more about sketching out your business problems as sort of a collaboration process with your team as well. But um, I can't tell you how many times you'll walk into a boardroom. A lot of people maybe are sitting in one right now. There's a whiteboard in that boardroom, and it's probably empty. They
Yeah,
go pretty much unused. They go pretty much unused, and once I've worked with some people that were, commanding the room at the whiteboard, and everybody, it's almost like if you have the microphone, everyone's looking at you, what you have to say. If you pick up the pen and you start sketching something out, people are watching, and you're really tackling problems in a new way that sometimes words just, that saying a picture is worth 1,000 words. It exists for a reason. Um, so that course, again, it's not something I see very often, so I thought maybe that was a good opportunity for me to put something out there just about, hey, if you tackle problem solving and team collaboration, especially in like a virtual environment like this, where you can use virtual tools like a virtual whiteboard or a physical whiteboard, very flexible. um, Trying that new approach out, it really kind of unlocks new solutions. It leads to innovative processes. You uncover bottlenecks, and you can get to process improvements and things like that in a way that's really hard to do if you're typing in a Word doc. and
No.
even harder to do if you're going cell by cell in a
Oh
spreadsheet.
yeah, spreadsheets.
Um,
Oh, crazy.
so I don't see it too often, and it was something that has worked really well for me. And I put that out there. We can get into it a little bit more if you're really curious, but partially because, like I mentioned, I think it solves two big problems that's really
Right?
disrupting sort of the accounting space and really the work that we do every day. One was the after COVID and the shift to remote work or remote friendly work. Most teams are now hybrid now, or the globalization. We're working with people from a different area of the country or the world, even, right? That's not going to
Yeah,
go away. And
yeah,
and I felt like that should probably give people an opportunity of trying new things to thrive in this new work environment. And using a virtual whiteboard was my way of saying I can get to as close to being in the same boardroom as you by using this virtual whiteboard. So one was tackling this disruption of what's happening in the work environment and this remote friendly environment that we're in now.
yeah,
The other one was, I mean, you can't have any conversation without talking about AI. I think we're only
yes,
7 minutes in and it's coming up, right? But um, the question with AI is, well, how am I going to offer value if AI is that good? And a lot of times it is that good.
yeah,
And you need to be able to find other ways to add value. And a lot of times that comes down to doing what AI can't do, right? Or excelling where AI struggles. And that's like leading a team and hosting a collaboration session, being able to read the room, connecting the dots, and
yeah,
multifaceted critical thinking, those kind of things. And all of those things come together when you've got a group of people and you're trying to work through a problem using a whiteboard. So those are the two disruptions I think that are happening in the world today that really made me think, well, we should try a new way of working. And a lot of people
yeah,
say you need to upskill, say you
yeah,
need to get ahead of AI, and say you need to do
yeah,
this and say you do that, but very few people are actually showing actionable ways of doing it. And this is my way,
yeah.
problem solving at the whiteboard. So that's what that course was
Absolutely.
all about.
When you mentioned that everybody has a whiteboard in their room, probably you have. Actually, I do. And the moment you said, I did look at it, and I'm like, it is empty. It is empty. It's
I
been
didn't mean to call you out, Saul. I didn't mean to
no,
call you out.
no, because you're right. I mean, it was there. It was there. I think, it's to 2025, 2018. Oh, it's 7 years old. Okay, it's 7-year-old whiteboard. It's still there. Okay, it's still there. And there was a reason why it was there, because that's exactly what it was. You wanted to have those things on the board, and you wanted to find out those creative ways of solving things. And the COVID happened, and rightly so. Now it's not like, I could just turn my camera to the whiteboard while everybody's on the call, and I'm like, okay, look what I'm doing. I'd probably need to
Yeah.
have the virtual solutions in place. And also for the fact that, you know we are so much driven with accounting systems and spreadsheets that we're just digging through that. And it's only when you get into the creative angle do you realize how much this whiteboard helps. In fact,
Yeah.
you must have had like so many people, and you must have seen so many situations. Like, can you share a story where sketching uncovered something that spreadsheets couldn't?
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE ONE to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the first time I've seen somebody really do it. This was after leaving public accounting, not something you see in public accounting really ever.
Uh-huh.
And a coworker was just walking through. It was even an onboarding, so they were teaching me how the business works, and it was very complicated. And the coworker was on the whiteboard, kind of connecting how the different business units come together, how the different data sources come together for us to prepare, say, a reconciliation or to come
Yeah.
up with a journal entry. And one, I found it really helpful, especially from like a learning. I was able to understand it much quicker. The brain processes visual 60,000 times faster than
Yeah.
just like a word. And actually, people say, well, I'm not a visual learner. I'm a verbal learner. People say that, but everybody's brain is the same. 50% of your brain's processing power goes to visuals. That's why it's so easy for you to connect what the visual is and to learn that way. So everybody to an extent is a visual learner, right? And so I ingested this information and was just thinking, what a great way to learn. And I kind of just learned by mimicking. And I started really with process improvement, that's something probably everybody can relate to, whether you're in public accounting or have your own practice, or you're, in industry in corporate America. Everyone's trying to improve their processes. We all have a spreadsheet with too many tabs on it, where you got to click, click, click over, with too many spread tabs on it, or too many places you got to copy here and paste over here and things like that. And there's usually ways to make that more efficient. And it's hard to look at a spreadsheet and just say, how do I make it more efficient? So the first instance I had was, when you started a new company, I kind of have three things that I'm usually going for. I try to fix what's broken. I
Uh-huh.
try to build a solution that doesn't exist, and I try to improve existing solutions and make them better. And all of those require you to unpack a problem, which is whatever process was handed down to me. And when you're seeing it for the first time, that's why everyone always says you're looking at this with fresh eyes, so you're going to have a new perspective. You're going to start to say, there's a lot of moving pieces here and it's all cobbled together. I think there's a better way.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how I had done it. My month end close was really long. I was doing late nights, and I was trying to just find a way to make my life easier and still keep the accuracy. So it was process improvement with my regular month end workflows and things like that. That really, I took what I was seeing other people do and I used it, for my own process efficiency practices, and it really worked. Since then, I still use it for that, but I've used it for like team collaboration and team problem solving, as well as the onboarding, as well as the process efficiency. So it's kind of that Swiss Army knife tool for me. So as much as I can share that with people, because I don't think a lot of people think about it much, even though it might be right in front of them. So I try to just share, hey, there's other ways of tackling these things, and people are always looking for a competitive advantage or a new way of doing things. And this is one of them. There's a million ways you could tackle it, but this is a way that has worked well for me. So I try to share it.
No, yeah, absolutely. And especially when it comes to the profession, when we talk about accountants, creative thinking is not really a trait that comes to mind when you say that you are a CPA or maybe a tax professional or an accountant. Creative thinking is not something that comes to mind. If there's something that comes to your mind the moment you say, okay, they don't really see you looking at it from the creativity angle.
Hmm.
So, before I jump onto something else, which I want to talk to you about, what advice do you have for firms who want to encourage more visual or creative thinking?
Um, yeah, thanks for asking the question. I would just say to embrace that thought process. Uh, I don't know if this is in other industries, but in accounting, it's very prevalent. The acronym SALLY, same as last
Yeah.
year. I have a feeling it came from accounting because everybody in accounting knows it. But it came because most people are not thinking of new ways of doing things. They are just rolling over the work paper, changing the date,
Yeah.
updating the number, and see if it works out, right? And if you try and offer a new solution, I've seen it in multiple different ways. You offer a new
Yeah.
solution, and sometimes your manager or boss is wildly open to it, and they love it.
Yeah.
In other cases, they just say, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," kind of thing, right? Why are
Yeah.
you trying to do something new? So I would just say embrace that creative thinking, because I think the profession, to your point about, you think of a creative accounting and you think that maybe there's some shady dealings, or cooking the books, or some fraud involved, right? And that is definitely what most people would think of when they think of creative accounting. And obviously this is a very ethical industry. Integrity is everything. So I think the profession at large has kind of ran away from creativity, saying, I don't want to associate myself with being a creative accountant. Whereas in reality, right now, firms are looking to be more innovative, right?
Yeah.
Innovative requires new ways of thinking, it requires creative thinkers. You can't be a profession that is shunning creative thinking and creativity. So I don't know that anybody's out there saying we don't want to hire somebody creative, but there's this stigma around creativity that has kept everything at arm's length,
Yeah.
within the accounting world. So I would just say embrace it more, because a lot of firms are saying they need to adapt to this new way of working with AI and technology and innovation. Well, I hate to tell you, but if you want to be leading at innovation, you're going to need a lot of creative thinkers on your team. And right
Yeah.
now, I don't think anybody's pushing the who's got a new idea and a new solution. It's all just like get the work done, get the work done, get the work
Yeah.
done. So I
Especially
would
right
just say,
now.
especially right now, and there's a lot of reasons that we can get into as to why that's the case. But I would just say, embrace it. It's going to be needed even more and more. And creativity is not a four-letter curse word here. Like you
Yeah.
should want creative thinkers on your team. There's only good things that come from that. And
Yeah.
so that's what I would suggest if there's any firms or any leaders that are pushing back on somebody who's bringing new ideas and trying alternative procedures and new approaches of streamlining things. Hear them out. Maybe they're going, they've got some good ideas in their head.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing something that everybody else is doing, you're just gonna be like everybody else. You want to set yourself apart because that's how we grow. You set yourself apart, you do something unique, and that's how that's the
Yep.
growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
And like when we're talking about, it's like when you grow, that's all about scaling. And you're scaling in your industry, you're adopting new creative thinking and everything. But it has its own, scaling. This all thing also has its own landmines, right? So when from what you've seen and from what you've talked to so many people, what usually starts to break first when accounting firms try to scale fast using such creative thinking ideologies?
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
Uh, yeah. It's almost like scale. Everybody wants to scale. They want more business. Nobody wants to turn down business. And I think part of that leads you to maybe try to take on too many types of business, right? Or you end up trying to compete with a million other firms on fees, and it's this race to the bottom where you're going to offer the lowest price because you want to win the work. And while I understand that, what it ends up being is now it's hard to turn a profit. Now you're grinding people out, trying to take shortcuts, trying to, you're pushing people to work overtime, and that's had repercussions in signups and attractiveness to students, right? And all because you're kind of charging too little, right? And by charging too little, you're not going to be able to scale actually, because you're going to end up with these processes where you're just trying to bang out the work. You're not really adding any additional value. You're not being that business advisor. You're more being like a task manager, like checking the box, going through checklist type things. Eventually, that ends up burning out as the
Yeah.
firms kind of burn out on a scale perspective. You
Yeah.
can only grow so much with those low fee, high touch point type clients before the model doesn't work. So I'd say if anything that really hinders scale, I think part of it is pricing that's too low, because then you're burning your employees out, making them work overtime. You can't pay them more because you're not charging enough. And then because you're not charging enough, you're forcing the, say, audit or the tax work to be done in such a short time span that the quality suffers. Maybe some shortcuts are taken that end up, burning you down the road too. And that's not sustainable. That's not a sustainable business model. And for some reason, firms have a hard time and pricing their work at a level that I think is more appropriate. Especially like you've got CPAs working on this stuff. CPAs had to go to school for 4 years. They had to take another additional credits to meet the 150 requirement in most cases. They had to
Yeah.
sit for a CPA exam that's 4 parts that has a 50% fail rate to get the credentials of a CPA. And then they do all this work burning the midnight oil for the work, and you charge peanuts for the output of the work, and I think that's sort of a trend that I think has really hurt the profession over the years, and it's kind of paying for it now with the low enrollments from the student side and
Yeah.
the pullback of people sitting for the exam, and then firms kind of getting to a point of, well, this is kind of what we've always done, and they have a hard time scaling because they can't
Yeah.
find the people to do it. The work that's
Yeah.
coming in is low paying. Anyway, I could go on and on about this, but there's
No,
there's a
no,
lot of
no.
there's a lot of problems with this underpricing that I think is pretty prevalent in the profession.
Yeah, yeah. And I really want to talk. I actually wanted to talk to you about it because I want to break down the phrase sketchy business practices,
Yeah.
because what what inspired you for that framing?
One, it's kind of attention grabbing, right? And the other thing is like I'm sketching out ideas on a whiteboard as part of the business practices, as part of the business of problem solving, like in everyday issues that maybe cross my desk. So yeah, I mean that's it. All came from being able to sketch out your ideas, and it has that double meaning that maybe is a little eye catching. Probably too clever for its own good, if I'm completely honest, Saul. But I'm also I don't take myself I take my work serious, but I don't take myself that serious too. You can have a little fun with this kind of thing, right? So um, if I'm solving a business problem and I'm sketching out the solution, that's where sketchy business practices came from.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's where we're trying to figure out also came from.
Yeah.
that that word that came from the same thought process. And you're
Yeah.
right, you're right. No harm having a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when a firm is going into this mindset, when the firm adopts this creative thinking process, and this is something that has to be it has to become like a culture, right? It cannot just be like some team that does it, or oh, Mike's team is the one who does it this way, but it's not something like everybody does it. It's like it has to become a part of a culture, a little bit of more on the lines of growth as well, you know but it's difficult to adopt this culture and continue to grow. It remains fragile if you don't have the right kind of people and the right kind of leadership to uh, have this kind of ideology happening in the organization. But
Yeah.
you also talked about the ethical part of it, right? That there's an ethics part of it, so you got to maintain that, you know while you're doing all this thing.
Hmm.
So you know when you're creating this kind of an environment wherein everybody is doing through the whiteboards and everything and what's not, how do you know there's this thing that when I started using whiteboards, this is something that I had a challenge with when I started using a virtual, like Zoom has a virtual whiteboard that you can
Yeah. Yeah.
play around and everything. So when I used it for the first time, I struggled a little bit with it because I was like, I have to use my mouse trackpad to
Mm.
play around with it, and I'm not able to pass that message across. Had I had a pen and a whiteboard, I would have been able to at least be, I mean, not like a Da Vinci level, but able to present it well. And then that whiteboard happened. But then eventually they started to happen because then I see the whiteboard is saved and everything. But then how do you remember that this is what was talked about? How do you remember it? Like, is there a way through which we can summarize it or something?
Yeah, you bring up a good point on especially when you're doing this virtually, right? And and let's be honest, like creativity comes in a lot of forms. Like what I'm
Yes.
doing is taking a visual form, using an office tool that's been around, just actually using it, right? Instead of not using it. There's a ton of other ways that you can have creative solutions and have these creative culture and a creative culture environment of a culture that is embracing creativity and things like that. So not to say that like the way that I've been doing it with visual thinking and those visual processes is the only way. But it's just the way that it's kind of resonated with me. But there is a hardware component too, because like in a boardroom, much easier to do, right? But when you're doing it virtually like this, if I were to pull up that whiteboard and you're trying to do it with your finger or worse, even the mouse, like the output is not great. So but I think the solution I've had was I carry a tablet. I wish I had it here. I could show you. But most tablets, you could download the app, you can sync it, right? That's the best part about technology is I could have it on the screen right now, have the app open on my tablet, and you could see it live during the meeting, which is how I usually conduct a good bit of my brainstorming meetings when there is somebody who's dialing in on a video conference, right? And there's an inclusivity aspect to it because to your point, it's more effective that way than just turning your camera to the whiteboard behind you. But there is a hardware component. Before having a tablet, I had a touch screen laptop, which is pretty common today. So There it's easy because you can just pick up a stylus, which are cheap, and then you can use it like that. And to your point, the virtual whiteboards are almost in everything. It's in Zoom, it's in Microsoft Teams, it's in Google Meet. There are specific whiteboard applications like Miro. There's it's at the 2 or 3 clicks away at most for most people, just like the whiteboard is 2 to 3 steps away from you, and both of those are going underutilized. But
Yeah.
so part of it is a hardware component, um but it's easy to figure out. It's easy to figure out, and the good thing about, I guess, what I was saying, if you're using a separate app, a lot of them have an infinite canvas, so it doesn't actually disappear when the meeting's gone.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think with Zoom, if we were to pull one up, I don't know if it offers an option to save it. You may have to screen grab, but
Yeah.
everybody knows how to take a screenshot too. So that's not the end of the world too. And to your point, it's not about being a Da Vinci, right? It's more about just communicating the ideas in your head and getting it out there in this visual representation of what you had in your head. And to go from your mind to being able to see it is powerful, because just like a computer, we only have so much working memory. And accounting, there's a lot of complex processes. Sometimes you just got to get it out of your head, and to free up some working space in your own head to be able to connect dots and apply that mental power to like other aspects of things that you're trying to solve. And that can happen. I think it can happen virtually. It can happen in the room. You can take a snapshot of it. You can do it on a tablet. You can do it on a touchscreen device. You can do it with a marker in the room. There's a bunch of ways it can be tackled, but there is a barrier of entry that goes beyond just, it's a little uncomfortable for people because people aren't used to doing it. So I think that's probably the biggest barrier to entry than actually the technology side of it.
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you something. I saw that intro video of your, because there's an intro video. That's when I came to know that, oh, this is something different. But then why I was
Yeah.
still interested into it, because I have a speaker. His name is Patrick Carverick. He's on our platform. He does tax. He teaches tax.
Yeah.
But he was one of the very first persons that I came across who was actually using a whiteboard to teach people tax and the problems. And like you can literally, he shares his screen and he's scribbling something on his tablet, which you're seeing on the screen, and it has worked out great for him. We have been having him since a long time, ever since we started. His courses are one of the top rated courses. And then when I
Oh, wow.
came across, and that was something that I was telling to all my other presenters as well, that this is something that you gotta think about. You
Mhm.
probably will be able to explain it better rather than a PowerPoint presentation, or a better way of saying it, rather than just talking or just showing something. And then when I saw that promo video of yours, I'm like, wait, this is exactly what I want people to know, that dude, this is something that you should be doing. It's not just
Yeah.
about teaching. It's you are, so because that's something that you have been doing. You just stopped doing it because now everything is gone virtual, so you're like, oh, whatever. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like, it was funny because my CEO is also a big fan of the whiteboard.
Oh,
And
yeah. Okay.
yeah, I mean, like, this is a funny story. I mean, this was many years back when we were still starting out. We were like 4 or 5 people, and we had this massive whiteboard in his cabin, and we would just go there. And now we are storyboarding everything. We are storyboarding, and
Oh,
we're looking
cool.
at
Yeah.
everything. But what happened was, back then, what would happen is, well, now that storyboard has happened, then we'd take a photograph of it,
Yeah.
put it into our Skype group chat, so then you can refer to it, that, okay, this is what we talked about. But the problem
Yeah.
was that those lines that were drawn, that this connecting to that and everything, now that, if your memory is really good, you may remember that, okay, this is what it meant when that line
Yeah.
was drawn from there to there. So then we started doing this practice, that after it, we'll create a summary of what we have talked. So it helps us to explain that image, that this is
Mm.
what was there, and that happened. And then eventually the whiteboard vanished. And then, you know, COVID happened. So there was nothing like a whiteboard. It was a difficult time because we were so much used to the whiteboard. Like
Yeah.
literally, let's get back to the drawing board. A problem,
Yeah.
let's get back to the drawing board. And then, like solving it. And like, we collaboratively solving it. Now that COVID happened, everybody's separated, everybody's collaborating through Zoom. It was a challenge for us because Zoom, Teams, we were trying to use everything that is there. We hadn't really thought of a whiteboard yet, a virtual whiteboard yet. We were just like, and that was actually that was what we were doing initially because we were like so stressed about it. We are like, there is a board and the camera is turned on the board and we're trying to do it because just we're so much used to that. We're so much used to
Yeah.
that until we
Yeah.
realize that, dude, this is not making sense. All right.
Yeah.
It's making sense while he's showing it. We are kind of getting an idea. Okay, this is what he's trying to say, but we've moved away from it. But then one fine day, we were actually doing a team activity. In fact, we were playing Pictionary, and we're like, let's use a virtual whiteboard for Pictionary, and we use that, and then we realized that, dude, we can use this for the other things as well that we were doing earlier. And then that's how we started to adopt it, and then we moved to the Microsoft ecosystem. So Microsoft has its own thing and everything. So now that has become a thing. So and I saw that this is something that you have been doing and you have been trying to tell people. So I was like, I wanted you on my podcast so everybody who is listening into this podcast can know that this is not just something that I'm doing it in my company, but this is
Yeah.
something that you have also visualized it and you've seen that this is something that helps people. So I wanted people to know that side of your story.
Oh, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I get real excited even just hearing how you and your team use it. And a lot of teams aren't doing that too. Like I'm not surprised, that you guys are growing, the level that you have and have seen that success because you've got a pretty dynamic approach to like how you're working through problems and building the business that you want, right? But you bring up a lot of good points there because I think one, you go way back to say at some point, like when you were talking about the tax the tax training and he's using the whiteboard and other people should take note. Similar kind of thing to me. I'm saying, hey, people should take note of this. Like it's powerful when you do it. And I think you saw that too, maybe in the Pictionary game to say, hey, like everybody look, like there's other ways of doing this. And a lot of times it falls on deaf ears, but I do appreciate being able to like share it because to your point about we somehow know how to do it, but we lost it. And that why is it that I'm not shocked at all that tax training is one of the most highly rated, but why is it so unusual? Because if you go through grade school and through high school, you're learning on a chalkboard and you're learning on a
Yes.
whiteboard. And in college, my professors were doing the same thing. And then you get into the 9 to 5 work environment and it goes away. And I don't understand why that's the main way of learning all up through your adulthood. And then it's like we forgot all about it and we switch to spreadsheets or slides, presentations with blocks of text. I mean, we've all been through those presentations with too many slides and and things like that. There's other ways of communicating it. It doesn't just have to be in a slide format, or spoken as like a couple talking heads like this. So that
Yeah.
same aha moment that you kind of had, which was like, wow, this is pretty effective and I can actually do something cool with it, was the same thing that I came to and was thinking, I don't see anybody else really doing this. That's why I love hearing stories of other people that are still using that to storyboard things or even to play Pictionary and come up with things, but
Yeah.
just using these tools because to your point about COVID and everybody goes home and your old solutions are out the door. For the most part, people have learned how to do Zoom in these video conferences. Everybody has their own team chats where they're sending pings and everything's in the cloud. Like you might use Google Docs so you can live comment. Like everybody is doing that. That's like that's the same thing people were using at the beginning of COVID. It's still the same things people are using now. Nobody's I don't want to say nobody, but most people have not adopted new tools like the virtual whiteboard and things like that to say, hey, why are we still using the starter kit of work from home stuff that we did at the beginning of COVID? Haven't we learned anything since then? Like, there's a new way of working. There's all these tools built around collaboration so you can work with people around time zones, around the world. And
Yes.
yet 9 out of 10 people are still using the same things they used 2 weeks into the COVID lockdown. So I
Yeah.
love hearing these stories of like how you started experimenting with different stuff. And I'm not surprised that you were like, hey, somebody else is doing something like this. Let's talk
Yes.
about it, because there's not a lot of other people. If you were to try to do a series of this, there's
Yeah.
not going to be a lot
Absolutely.
of people.
Yeah. No. And I tell you, look, it was a challenge as well, because the leadership also has to accept it, right? Because this idea came out from a game, which was a very internal team activity. The leadership also has to accept it, and the others also have to accept it. And I was fortunate to have a leader who was open to that. That okay, I mean, he really loved it because he loves the whiteboards. He's like, okay, and rightly said, all he had to do was connect a tab, figure out a way to do it. There was a learning curve, but there were some ways that this was not working. Why is it not working? MacBooks are different, Windows are different, and those things. All that happened. But now it's a culture in itself. In the organization, it's a culture in itself, and majority of the discussions, we have got these things that like if it can be done in like, don't put it in an email, if it can just be like talked out, and if it is something that requires to be explained, if you can do it through a whiteboard, don't prepare a presentation, right?
I
Keep
love
it
that.
raw, keep it normal, be free and just do it. But it together with that, what we also noticed was that this embracing of this new technologies, it it does well with the Gen Zs, and it was a little bit difficult for us with certain employees because we had to actually train them to become
Yeah.
comfortable with that thing. And for Gen Zs, it was like, okay, this is like, I do this like every day. They're doing it on their phones. There's tiny screens. They're doing all those things, but they got different expectations because they see it
Yeah.
differently. Their perspective is different. So
It's a new way of trying to do things, and I think Gen Z is more open to that, and those little technological challenges that Gen Z can breeze right through, right? But to somebody who's been doing it, like if you've been around long enough like me, there was a day when people printed everything out on paper and marked things up and handed a stack of papers, here, clear these comments. Shifting away from that, which most places I hope have done that by now, but that was a big change, trying to do something in a completely different way. And what we're talking about today is completely different. Not necessarily the physical whiteboard, that's kind of been around, but
yeah,
it's still different in that people weren't using it all these years. Most people aren't using it all these years, and those that have really found the benefits of it. But then the virtual version of that, I feel like is very low adoption. So I've been a big
yeah,
fan. It seems like you've been a big fan. I like that we're talking about this, and hopefully people take that to the barrier to entry that they see. I hope that after hearing like us chat about this kind of stuff, that they say, you know what, let me just give it a shot, because I think once you give it a shot, you're like, hey, this is pretty cool. And it's not bad to try something different. And I got to give Gen Z and maybe some of the millennial base a lot of credit for being open to kind of lead that effort too.
no, absolutely. I mean, you know I did my Six Sigma, and when I did my Six Sigma, there were three things I learned that, if the company wants to grow, three things: right people, right projects, right tools, and methodologies. And when I got the whiteboard thing, the very next challenge was getting the right people, because there is that point wherein some people would just not accept to it.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a thing. And also with the Gen Zs, while they accepted it like very easily, their expectation about the industry and where they want to go is also changed a lot.
Hmm.
They're seeing this in a different tangent. I mean, wouldn't you agree? I mean, like they're seeing
Oh,
the
yeah.
different.
Big time. Like the days of, you go through the grind because I went through the grind. And,
Yes.
I did 150 hours and sat through the exam, so you do it. And I did the busy seasons, so why is that not okay with you? And I love that Gen Z is thinking, well, just because you did it doesn't mean it has to make sense to me. And they're pressuring a lot of these things as far as well, why do I have to come in 5 days a week? Why can't I do a little bit from home? They were probably in college and maybe starting their career. There's a good chance they maybe started their career and never met anybody on their team in person, for
Yeah,
years potentially. Like there's still even
yeah,
some teammates that I'll meet for the first time years later. And that's just wild to think about. And they understand that, look, I could come into the office 5 days a week, but why? Like, so I feel like things are kind of settling in this hybrid approach, which I love, by the way.
yeah,
Because I definitely am a proponent of having some in-person time, but like offer the flexibility to do some work at home too, because I think Gen Z, the people appreciate it. You can still get the work done. It just frees up so much more in life. But if you think of the old school way of doing things was, okay, COVID's over. Everybody back to what we were doing before. Come back to the office 5 days a week. And I like the Gen Z's like, why? Why do we just same as last year? Basically, our work processes too. So I love that they're pushing back on some of it. I think it's also pushed the accounting profession to address some of these long-standing issues that
yes,
everyone just kind of sucked up and just said this is the way it has to be. And Gen Z's kind of said, well, then I'm not going to do it. And the profession is like, well, we need people to be in accounting. We need people joining the profession. So, okay, let me rethink how we can do things in a way that is more attractive to maybe the students today. And I
yeah.
love
No, no, absolutely. In fact, honest thought, we just thought it's the whiteboard, and that's what we thought was okay. This is something really cool because we were getting to it, and then somebody came up and is like, you should be using Microsoft Loop, and we're like, what is Microsoft Loop? He's like, all those chats that happen after we've had that whiteboard thing. Why don't we do it in Loop so we can collaborate? And then this guy who has joined in as an associate as like, this is how we do it, and we're like, oh, that's good. Now that's happening. And then somebody else comes and says, hey, you know what, I found this thing called napkin AI.
that.
And like it's literally like the napkin, like probably you're sitting in a cafe and you probably thought of a brilliant business plan and you wrote it on a paper napkin, and now you take that paper napkin somewhere and this was our original idea. So that's, and he showed,
Wow.
like you have these random ideas, like you probably wrote it somewhere, you put it into napkin AI, and napkin AI is kind of creating a visualized presentation of it and all that, and I'm like, whoa, that's cool.
Wow. Yeah.
So now we are we are never saying no to anything new or anything. If there's a different way to get anything done, we have kind of got that culture now that okay, if you think there's a better way to do it, bring it on board. Every week we have this time where anybody can come and share their ideas. It's, if they don't have ideas, okay, that's okay, we can skip
Yeah.
it. But if it is, even if it's for 5 minutes, come in, show us what you've got, and see, and we
Yeah.
see the business case, and then we put it in.
That's
So
awesome.
I kind of feel that the Gen Zs are a very important uh, change catalyst thing that organization should be embracing
Yeah.
if they want to
Yeah.
move forward.
I'm
So
curious because you've talked to a lot of great people. I know you're involved with the education side of things. You're working with instructors and things like that. How common is that for people to embrace? Hey, you got a new way of doing things. Let's hear it. Is that relatively common, or do you feel like most companies are not really doing it the way that you're doing it, and maybe they're more traditional?
I guess not many are accepting it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's what I thought you would
And and
say.
and, and and it's a leadership thing.
Yeah.
You hear people saying, I've spoken to this other gentleman who was speaking about leadership and how leadership needs to inculcate a culture of coaching, right? Sean
Mhm.
Glaze, I had a podcast with him some time back wherein he was talking about, as leaders you need to first demonstrate that you are also open to learning. So it is only when you are able to demonstrate that, would you be able to inculcate that culture within the organization, that everybody should be learning something new and sharing it with everybody. Because if the
Yeah.
leader does not show that I'm coachable, that culture of everybody else also thinking about learning something and sharing it with the team and having that culture wherein you can share that this is something that I learned is never going to come. You know,
Yeah,
it has to come from the top.
you're right.
So
You're right. It's
that's
so true because I think a lot of leaders are saying the right things. We got to be adaptable. We need innovation. We need new ideas. We need automation. We need to use AI. We need to think differently. Everyone has the right words. But then when push comes to shove, well, I want to use the same tools. Well, I want to sit in the office 5 days a week like we used to. Well, I don't
exactly,
want to embrace these new things. And,
exactly.
and that's where, to your point, it can't just be lip service. Like you have to put it into play. And people notice that too. People know when you're just giving some corp speak and you're saying one thing but you're doing another. And that's kind of where I think we're the accounting profession, but really the world is in this really great spot because uh, the older millennials like myself are approaching leadership levels. A lot of the CPAs right now, the vast majority are at retirement age. There's going to
Yes.
be a big shift in.
Yes.
There's a new sheriff in town soon, and that
Yes.
new sheriff is more open to these kind of things. And I can't wait for that to happen. I feel like we've just been talking about it's a slow burn. Nobody wants to
Yeah.
retire because it's
Yeah.
expensive out there, and like people are living longer. But I think that baton, that torch is being passed.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that like the older generation can't adapt. They can, but
They can.
I'd say if there was going to be a segment of the workforce that's resistant to the change or saying one thing but actually doing another, it's probably the older generation of workers. The younger generation of workers has been forced to adapt and they grew up with different technology coming out all the time. So the resistance isn't at the bottom end, it's at the top end.
Yeah.
And I
It's
think
at the
things
top.
are kind of
Right.
changing now. Yeah, things are changing. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're just coming at the top of the hour, but before we wrap up, let's do some quick hits. Just go with your gut. I'm just going to ask you a question. It's kind of like a rapid fire and tell me what you
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. What's one sketchy thing you saw and said, nope, not doing that?
There's not a ton there, but I was once on an audit client. They had specific a restricted cash account. They were only supposed to use it for certain purposes. That was what the donors and everybody had required of them, and they were using it, transferring it to other cash accounts to use it in a more free way. And they were kind of pressuring me a little bit to say, well, the total cash is the total cash. What do you care if it's this account or that account? And I said, well, I do care. You told all these people who donated the money, and all these grants and everybody that you shouldn't be using it for anything other than this very specific purpose. And so I ended up kind of raising that as a flag. It kind of ended up being quite a big deal, but that was pretty sketchy to just say like, who cares what the people who gave me the money think in the grant? I'm going to use it how I want. So that was one of the things that came up back in my audit days.
All right. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
One more, one trend in accounting you think is completely overhyped.
Oh, I don't know if it's a trend, but I'd say the climbing the corporate ladder and titles in general and placing
Yeah.
so much value on titles. Um, that's a long-standing trend, but it's completely overblown, especially I've been at a couple different companies now. Some companies will have the same title but require half the experience, right?
Yeah.
Some companies will have what is perceived as a low title, but the work they're doing is C-suite somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people get hung up on titles a
Yeah.
lot, and it's a little bit of an ego thing. I've had to go through it myself, but I would just encourage anybody. I think that's overhyped to think that you need to always chase that title because a lot of
Yeah.
the learnings I've had didn't have anything to do with the title. A lot of the big growth pieces have, like, I
Yeah.
remember at one point I took a step back in title. I probably
Uh-huh.
learned even more in that role than had I taken a step up in title. So that was the first indication for me of like, don't get too hung up on the titles. So I don't know if I
Wow.
consider that a trend, but still.
Well done. Well done. And one last. All right. A book, podcast, or a tool that you love, that you're loving right now.
Okay. Well, maybe keeping it on the theme of what we've talked about. So I mentioned obviously there's a lot of whiteboard tools. My favorite is Miro. It's another one
Okay.
that's got like a infinite whiteboard. it's free for like a couple different. You can have a couple different boards for free. So I use that tool a lot. It's got a lot of different features, built-in AI stuff like that. So that's the tool that I would suggest is used, and anybody who can present their screen can basically tap into this and present it. So it's not like you have to be in the Teams or the Zoom ecosystem. I don't know if it's just because you were talking about this AI napkin approach earlier, but the first thing, and right on topic, there's a book by Dan Rome called Back of the Napkin. And it's
Mhm.
all about how he was using visuals similar to what you were saying. If I can put it on a napkin and explain it to somebody in a visual form, that's not a 50-page slide deck. It's not a 30-page PDF. It's on a napkin with a few visuals, maybe a diagram, something like that. If I can get that at the back of in the back of a napkin, then I've taken something very complex and I've made it easy to understand. And this book, Back of the Napkin by Dan Rome, is all about how you can actually do that, because it sounds easy. Oh, draw something on the napkin, but it's not. It's hard to simplify things, and
Yeah.
but that's a really cool book, and made me think of it when you brought up the napkin earlier.
Whoa, whoa. I mean, I would have thought, but thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
Mike, I mean, we're coming to the hour, so thank you so much. It's been a blast. Super insightful, creative, and just real. Just exactly
Yeah.
what it is. So thank you so much for joining us on We're Trying to Figure Out. All right. And to everyone who is listening in, do check out Sketchy Business Practices if you haven't already. And hey, if you're stuck in a spreadsheet, maybe it's time to grab a whiteboard.
Oh, I like it. Saul, this has been fun, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. And to everyone else, like always, stay strong and keep innovating in everything that you do. Cheers.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now